What is up, all the rock and rollers out there in podcast land? It is the Ayatollah of rock and roll. Yes, it is your gracious and humble host for the Fortress of Rock, the Maestro, Kevin Crane here, episode 165 on October the 11th, 2024. As always, giddy and ecstatic to have you aboard for our weekly discussion of the music that we love, that of course being classic rock and roll. Now I will admit, we're a little lean this week on News of the World, our first segment, which of course is our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen. Very, very, very sparse in terms of new news, music news, concert announcements, all that. We'll do what we can here for a few minutes and then we'll move on. A lot of meat on the bone for the rest of the show, but just a few minutes here on what little news we've got in the world of rock and roll. Kiss. Paul Stanley let word leak on social media in kind of an awkward way. I believe he was discussing his girlfriend being interviewed for what's turning out to be a 5-part documentary about the band, which will cover, of course, the farewell tour, the end of the road tour. I was fortunate enough to see it early on, one of the first shows, and then you have the COVID delay. But this is something I am looking forward to seeing, to watching, especially after the mess that I had to subject myself to recently with Bon Jovi, and then of course the underwhelming Nickelback documentary. The problem, of course, is going to be how much control, how much editorial control are Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley going to exert over the production, the creation of this 5-part documentary. Are they going to whitewash it? Are they going to make it all about how awesome and great and smart they are? And I've always said they are very, very smart, very savvy when it comes to their business sense, marketing, geniuses when it comes to marketing. So that gives me a little bit of pause, because will they really let the dirt out? Will they really let the controversies out there? Even with this farewell tour, if that's all they're focusing on, and they're not going back in time and doing a definitive recap of the history of the band, there's been enough controversy over the end of the road tour in terms of things like not using the live recording, pushing overdubs, pushing recorded background tracks, that kind of thing. That in and of itself, I would hope they would address. I don't think they will. I'm not optimistic that we're going to get a lot in terms of the truth of what happened over the last 4 or 5 years during the end of the road tour, but we'll see. I am just a cynical jerk. A little bit of tour news, not much, but if you're up in Canada, I don't understand how this bill works, because of course I am a biased, fanatical Collective Soul fan. But up in Canada, 15 dates announced, February and March for 2025. Our Lady Peace taking the headlining spot, and Collective Soul will be the support act. I find that a little odd. I find it a little silly, because I don't see how Our Lady Peace in any way, shape, or form is comparable chart-wise, sales-wise to anything Collective Soul is done, but maybe things are different in Canada. Our neighbors to the north, maybe they view these bands differently, like Nickelback, even though they're still awesome down here. They're legendary up in Canada. Loverboy, Bryan Adams. So just Our Lady Peace has never been on my radar. Really never been on my radar in terms of a band I've followed, but they are the headliners on this tour with Collective Soul. So if you're up in the Great White North, February and March of 2025, check out Our Lady Peace and Collective Soul. Then unfortunately we have a couple of moments of silence to pass along. Now, he was not with the Allman Brothers Band all that long, but he was there towards the end in terms of their studio work. Johnny Neal played keyboards from 1989 to 1990 with the Allman Brothers Band, and he just passed away. And then, of course, I don't want to just relegate Cissy Houston to being Whitney Houston's mother, because she was a very well-respected, a noted backup singer going back to the late 60s, 70s. So Cissy Houston and Johnny Neal passed away in the world of music here this past week, so thoughts and prayers go out to their families, friends, anybody they worked with, the Allman Brothers, of course. Both situations are very touchy because, of course, we know Whitney Houston passed much earlier than she should have, and a child should never die before their parents. And of course, the Allman Brothers, a lot of the core members of the group have passed away here over the last 10 to 15 years. So, as it always seems to be here, as we go further and further on with the Fortress of Rock, we're going to see more and more of this. It's sad. It's just a fact of life, because as I read earlier today, something completely unrelated, but the one opponent you cannot beat is Father Time. So let's move on to Breakdown. I told you News of the World was going to be pretty short but sweet, bittersweet. So Breakdown, of course, are a tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, where we look at the best in new music. And we have got an album review and a couple songs from U2. But I will admit, I'm throwing you a curveball this week. I'm cheating a little bit. I was originally planning on reviewing the Smashing Pumpkins, Agori Mori Me. And I listened to it, it was fine, but it's one of those things where you get distracted. You're focusing on something right in front of you, and then there's that little bright light off to the side that draws your attention, that pulls you away. Your peripheral vision, it starts to distract you. Because I knew that Myles Kennedy's new album was coming out today, here on October the 11th, along with The Offspring. Supercharged is also out. I knew that I had to listen to Myles Kennedy and his new album, The Art of Letting Go. So I figured, why not just tear through The Art of Letting Go 5 or 6 times today while I'm doing other stuff and just review that. Normally I don't like to do that. I prefer to give myself a week, let an album grow on me, listen to it multiple times, let some of the songs either get better, get worse on multiple listens. So this is a little different for me, just to take one day, listen to an entire album half a dozen times, and review it for you now tonight, Friday night, on the Fortress of Rock. Now, 3 of the songs I've already reviewed, I've already listened to a bunch, so that helps a little bit. And the fact that the album is only 10 songs made things easier as well. So, let us get into the new album from Myles Kennedy, The Art of Letting Go, 10 songs, and as always here on The Fortress, we will go through it track by track. And the title track is the first song, and it is phenomenal, The Art of Letting Go. One of the best songs on the album, probably top 2. Great lead-in track. Now, something that with Myles Kennedy, his solo work and with Alter Bridge, there are a couple of recurring themes that you will find in the lyrics throughout his catalog. Again, whether it's Alter Bridge, whether it's his solo work. Optimism, regret, mortality, forgiveness. Those are the main themes you will find throughout Myles Kennedy's solo work as well as his work with Alter Bridge. You're not going to get a lot of the, heavy-duty anger, the world stinks, let's burn it down, that type of stuff. You're not going to get a lot of lovey-dovey romantic stuff either. Again, it's all about optimism, the fact that we're all going to die, forgiveness, regret, very, very true, real emotional topics that Myles Kennedy handles. But of course, he does not forsake the music. On The Art of Letting Go, it's a perfect example of the genius of Myles Kennedy. He does not even say the words, the art of letting go, until the very end of the song. And yes, it is about letting go of anger, letting go of negative emotions, moving on with your life. Then we move on, of course, to what I think is going to be one of the top songs of 2024. Say What You Will has been out for months. It just doesn't get old to me. I listen to it at least half a dozen times every week, ever since it's come out. There are so many great subtle things about the song, especially musically, that you just gotta, if you have not listened to Say What You Will by now, which was the first release off The Art of Letting Go, I don't know what else to tell you. You missed the boat. Listen to this now. So we get a 1-2 punch, a phenomenal 1-2 punch to start off The Art of Letting Go with the title track, and then Say What You Will. Now, one other thing I want to mention about these two songs, which I will bring up later on in my review, is that you've got to remember that Myles Kennedy, he's got a phenomenal voice, of course, but he is so overshadowed and underrated as a guitar player. And that's why I love listening to his solo albums, is because he gets to step forward 100% full time on every song and play lead guitar. Because with his other two projects, with Alter Bridge, Mark Tremonti is going to take at least 50, 60, 70% of the lead guitar parts. Now, Myles Kennedy, I've seen Alter Bridge. in concert a couple times. Myles Kennedy, does take some of the lead guitar work away from Mark Tremonti on occasion. And then they'll do the dual stuff where part of the song is Tremonti, part of the song is Kennedy, like Blackbird, one of the greatest live songs ever. And then he moves on to work with Slash and the Conspirators, and you know damn well he's not playing lead guitar when you got Slash. So these solo jaunts for Myles Kennedy are really the only time where he gets to, again, step forward in terms of his guitar work. And I want to point out in the first two songs, his guitar work shines. I would say in about half of the songs on The Art of Letting Go, he's got killer solos. And I will point them all out to you as we go through this review. Now, tracks 3 and 4 really sound to me a lot like Alter Bridge songs. They're a little bit more of the optimistic stuff. I'm not saying that Myles Kennedy doesn't focus on optimism on his solo work, but after now we've listened to a couple of his solo albums, he tends to be a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more introspective, and it's not just the whole, oh, life is good, don't let people get you down, push forward and fight. Alter Bridge can slip into that on occasion. And of course, Mark Tremonti, with his work with Creed, they definitely slipped into that a lot more than I was comfortable with. But that's a discussion for another day, my opinion on Creed. And I cannot stand the fact that they're back in the picture again with Scott Stapp, taking Alter Bridge away from me. But the third song on The Art of Letting Go is Mr. Downside. And it's still a good song. I'm not saying, this is the thing, the two songs I'm going to tell you about here, tracks 3 and 4, are still really, really good songs. It's just they sound like they could have worked very, very well if we had not had Creed get back together, and maybe these two songs could have been used by Alter Bridge instead. Maybe Mark Tremonti could have added a little more muscle to these songs and brought them up just a little bit more, made them a little bit harder, a little bit heavier, gave them a little bit more of an edge, but they're still very good songs. So track 3, Mr. Downside, lyrically got a nice little twist to it. Of course, Mr. Downside, Myles Kennedy, the hook, the chorus, talking about don't always look at the downside of things, and the chant, the chorus at the end, take a chance along the way. Not necessarily the most profound line in the world, but it works here on this song. And then track 4 is the third single that we've reviewed here in the past on The Fortress, Miss You When You're Gone. And this one's growing on me. It's growing on me more and more every day. I kind of dismissed it initially as a little bit of fluff, one of those radio-friendly hits, mid-tempo hits. And of course, that's me thinking old school. We know that doesn't really exist anymore. When I say radio-friendly, we know that rock and roll is not welcome on radio anymore. But if you listen to Miss You When You're Gone, you'll understand what I'm saying. You just have to take your mind and move it back about 30 years. About the last time that you could actually listen to the radio, and the rock stations might play new music, and they might have an influence on the Billboard charts. So Miss You When You're Gone is a nice, I'll say it again, radio-friendly hit formula type song. But Myles Kennedy is smart enough to do it so that it doesn't alienate the rock crowd. It's not a power ballad. How about that? Let's put it that way. It's not a power ballad. It's a very good mid-tempo, see you later. You can take it as a lover's kiss-off. You can take it, again, as something dealing with mortality. Are we talking about a fond farewell to a romance? Are we talking about a farewell to somebody who has left the mortal coil? Then we get back to a little bit more serious, hard rock and stuff. Although Behind the Veil, track 5, does a great job of slow, heavy, slow. You guys know what I'm talking about. A song that starts out for the first 45 seconds to a minute, acoustic or really, really downbeat, lower volume electric guitar, and then it builds up the momentum into a crescendo and then comes back down at the end to where we all started this journey. Behind the Veil is a very, very good song. And so now halfway through The Art of Letting Go, I'm loving this album. Unfortunately, it starts to stumble a bit in the second half. And the problem I have is with track 6. Track 6 is the one song that I really do not like. And I found it odd that this was the song that Myles Kennedy and his record company decided to release as the 4th single right before the official album release today. A few days ago, they released Saving Face as the 4th single, and I don't get it. I just don't get it. As much as I love Myles Kennedy, and I think he is so much better than most of the other artists out there when it comes to performance, creativity, songwriting, you name it. Saving Face, I just don't get it. I've listened to it over and over and over again. It's not catchy. If there is such a thing as a generic Myles Kennedy song, this would be it. I would say Saving Face is the worst song I've ever heard from Myles Kennedy as a solo artist. It's not abysmally bad, but it's definitely not something I would recommend. If I was trying to sell somebody on Myles Kennedy who somehow never listened to his music before, Saving Face would never, ever, ever be the song that I would recommend. And it's really disappointing, because if somehow they had found one more song, a much stronger song to plug in here at this point instead of Saving Face, The Art of Letting Go would have been a tremendous album. But as it is, with this stuck right in the middle, kind of brings the album down a little bit in my view and my rating. Now track 7, we get some more phenomenal guitar work. Eternal Lullaby. Now this song, this is one of those songs where maybe I shouldn't have rushed to review the album as quickly as I did, because I could see Eternal Lullaby growing on me a little bit more after another 4 or 5 listens. It's very good, but not great. But point out again the guitar work. Guitar work on Eternal Lullaby is awesome. And then track 8, of course, was the second single released a few months back, The Art of Letting Go, Nothing More to Gain. Not as great as the initial single, Say What You Will, but still very, very good. Almost ashamed to compare the two. It feels like it's unfair to Nothing More to Gain, that the first single was so great and so awesome that you really had nowhere to go but down. And it's a shame because, again, Nothing More to Gain is a great, great song. A great follow-up, second single. Then we move on to track 9, Dead to Rights. Dead to Rights is another one of the songs with phenomenal guitar work. Get a lot of slide guitar here in Dead to Rights. It's got an interesting, somewhat catchy chorus. But beyond that, I liked it. I did like it, but I didn't love it. I know we're getting a lot of that here on The Art of Letting Go. And then finally, great song title for the final track, track 10, How the Story Ends. And it's a very, very, very good song. One more time, I just want to point out, the guitar work from Myles Kennedy is fantastic. So I would say 6 of the 10 songs here on The Art of Letting Go, you've really got to appreciate and admire Myles Kennedy's guitar work. The title track, Say What You Will, Behind the Veil, Eternal Lullaby, Dead to Rights, How the Story Ends. Those 6 songs, you've really got to pay attention and give Myles Kennedy credit. Give him his due for being a great guitar player in his own right, because like I said, he's usually overshadowed in the other projects that he normally works on. So The Art of Letting Go, I knew I was going to like it. I just knew I was going to. You can say I'm biased in my criticism or lack of criticism, but you would be too. You have your favorite bands, you have your favorite performers, and you're going to give them a little bit more of a break because they connect with you. I will say this, though, being as fair as I can possibly be, I would probably say this is the weakest of his solo work. So take that for what you will. Say what you will. That doesn't mean it's a bad album. It's still a very good, very solid album. I might have to come back and discuss this for a few minutes on Breakdown a month or two down the road. This was a very odd, very unusual decision on my part to jump in and go with this album, only listening to it through one day as opposed to the Smashing Pumpkins. It reminds me of what I would have done if I had a podcast back in the early 80s. I know. So you have to have a willing suspension of disbelief here. But this is how I would have behaved if a Van Halen album would have come out. I would have reviewed it the first day it came out because I would have already listened to it nonstop throughout the day 6 or 7 times. So in a way, this is kind of a great feeling, a little bit of old school euphoria. Getting an album out there that I've been looking forward to for months and months. And it did not let me down, despite the fact that I'm being a little picky about 3 or 4 of the songs on this album. I had very, very high expectations coming in based on how great Myles Kennedy's previous solo albums were. The Art of Letting Go is not quite as good as those albums, but it's still very, very good. Highly recommended to everybody out there in the Fortress of Rock audience. Please, please, please do not take my criticisms as overly negative. Last time, I'm going to qualify it and say, when you love an actor, a performer, a band, whatever it might be, you tend to overlook the scars, the warts. You have to do your best to try to focus on the bad as well as the good, to be fair and honest when you talk about the movie, the album, the song with somebody else, somebody who might not be as familiar with the performers. That's what I'm trying to do here. So, even though I tried to be a little bit overly critical because trying to overcome my bias, don't take it as anything other than I loved Myles Kennedy's The Art of Letting Go. I definitely get out there on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to music, and give The Art of Letting Go a listen right now. Now, in terms of songs, we have 2 songs from U2 for our featured reviews this week when it comes to new songs. Now, are these technically new songs? No. We've discussed these songs here recently on the Fortress of Rock. I admire the fact that U2 is doing this. I think it's phenomenal. We're going to talk a little bit more about this later on when we get to wrap it up with another band. Being a Van Halen fan, it's depressing and disappointing to me that they won't, Alex Van Halen and Wolfgang Van Halen will not do this. And it upsets me to no end. And of course we know Sammy Hagar, Michael Anthony, David Lee Roth are shut out on this. They have no control over getting into the vaults and digging in and finding the lost gems from the studio floor, the cutting room floor. Yes, I know it's all digital now, but back in the old days, they used tape. That's why we still refer to it as cutting room floor. Same thing with movies. But U2, God bless them, love them to death for this. Their big comeback album, when it came to getting back their original sound from their heyday with the Joshua Tree and the Unforgettable Fire, then they went off and experimented with pop and Zooropa. And I'm sorry, nobody liked it except for haughty-tawdy, nerdy critics. Then they came back with How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb, which was a big hit, as they went back to more of a straightforward rock and roll sound. Bono is still a phenomenal songwriter, and that's the thing. I think that when they went into that experimental phase, they lessened Bono's effect on the band. They basically lessened all 4 members' effects on the band. They were trying to fit U2 into these specific pigeonholes, whether it was disco or electronica. And then they finally came back and said, let's just be U2 again. Well, now it's seeming like it was pretty obvious that was a very fertile rebirth for the band. Because not only was How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb a huge hit, creatively and sales-wise, but now we're finding out, as we're going to get released here in November, 10 songs that were left again on the quote-unquote cutting room floor that did not fit the album, that, I don't know if it was the band, the engineers, the producers, didn't think worked in the confines of what they were trying to construct. So we're going to have 10 songs coming out physically, vinyl, record store day. And I issued my correction here recently. Doesn't look like we're going to get a CD version of it unless you buy the big, massive, expensive deluxe reissue of How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb, but you can buy these 10 songs digitally. Burn yourself a CD, put them on a flash drive, whatever you want to do. But it will be called How to Reassemble an Atomic Bomb. And the first 2 songs that have been released from that, these songs that were not good enough somehow to make it onto the album. First up is Picture of You, subtitled X plus W, which is Xanax plus wine. And this is the best stuff I have heard from U2, I would say, in almost a decade, if not more. Number one, the lyrics, Bono's lyrics are kind of like stream of consciousness. I'm not going to say they're as crazy as REM. REM, of course, it's the end of the world as we know it, is the ultimate example of stream of consciousness lyrics, where Michael Stipe is just rambling on and on. It sounds like it's incoherent, but somehow it all makes sense and fits and rhymes. Kind of what you get here to a lesser extent from Bono in Picture of You. And the Edge has this propulsive, fantastic guitar. Doesn't necessarily sound like his trademark guitar work, but that's fine. That's okay, and it works beautifully here. I will say right now, Picture of You, X plus W. God, that's so clunky to say. Normally I would get a little upset with the pretentiousness of the title, but it works here. I will say Picture of You could be one of the best songs of 2024, even though it was recorded, 2 decades ago. And then we have the second release from this upcoming project, Country Mile. Now, I mentioned earlier that there was a song or two on Myles Kennedy's new album that I'm anticipating that they're going to grow on me. And Country Mile by U2 is exactly the same way. I wasn't a huge fan of it at first, but on multiple listens, it's starting to really grow on me. It's not nearly as good and will never be as good as Picture of You. But the more you listen to it, the more it gets to you. It grows on you. The one criticism I have of Country Mile, it's too long. This one could have been cut down by about a minute. Because as it stands right now, its current runtime is almost 5 minutes. And it does get a little bit repetitive. Definitely the last minute could have been sliced up, chopped up a little bit. But it's still getting to be, in my opinion, on multiple listens, a great song. Not as good as Picture of You. But the overall impression is that, number one, you guys need to listen to both these songs. Depending on how you feel about U2, I guess. But I know people who are kind of on the fence with U2 who've listened to these songs and like them. And they like U2 when they don't take themselves seriously. When they started off with their Sphere residency and released Atomic City, that was another example of just being a band playing, having fun, not worrying about solving the world's problems. So definitely, number one, listen to both of these songs. They're both very, very good. But once again, I will emphasize one more time. How is it that other bands... Now, Tom Petty is an exception. The estate of Tom Petty, they've done a phenomenal job of releasing all this archival material, all these great songs. I mean, we've gotten live deluxe sets, we've gotten box sets. That's what we want. What is the point of holding all this back? What is the point of not letting the fans hear this music? Especially in a case like Tom Petty, where unfortunately he passed away. So let the fans hear it. And this is why I get so upset with Van Halen, is that Eddie is gone now. And Wolfgang and Alex are being so, we can't, it's got to be just perfect, it's got to be just the right shit. Stop it. As much as I love you two, stop it. Stop being buttheads. I almost cursed. But again, I try to keep the Fortress of Rock clean. And this is, I told you with Myles Kennedy, as much as I love the guy, I was trying to temper my enthusiasm for his new album. And now I am trying to criticize Van Halen for not doing what U2 is doing here. Get the music out to the fans. If there is no more Van Halen, if there's never going to be any more what are you waiting for? Us to die? You want the fans to die before you release it? How cruel is that? I wish Alex Van Halen and Wolfgang Van Halen would think about that for a minute. How about every year that you hold off on releasing what's in the vault, more and more Van Halen fans from the 70s and the 80s are dying. They are. I'm in my late 50s. You get to that point, you got to start wondering about, when you're going to kick off, what you're going to have engraved on your tombstone, where you're going to have your ashes spread. So in a way, every year that goes by, it makes me more and more upset. The selfishness of Van Halen. So I will applaud Bono and The Edge, and of course Adam Clayton and Larry Mullins for doing this, for digging in and saying, hey, looks like we had enough for a double album. That's just me, that's not what they said, but considering it looks like we might have 10 awesome songs here, that's what it seems like. They had enough for a great double album here. So I cannot wait to hear the full 10-track digital version of how to reassemble an atomic bomb. But the first two songs out there, Picture of You, X+W, and Country Mile, are great. So definitely get out there and check them out ASAP, kids. So now Doc Brown is mad at me because he feels like I'm putting too much pressure on him for segment 3, which of course is I Want to Go Back, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money. And I try to tell him, look, I had a full breakdown segment, okay? What are you complaining about? He's like, well, News of the World, you had nothing. Nothing in News of the World. So now I feel like I've got to carry this heavy burden, this heavy load, and we've got to somehow find all this fantastic, mesmerizing, phenomenal stuff in the rock and roll time stream. And so my response was, suck it up, Buttercup, let's go. So he has got the DeLorean up to 1.21 gigawatts. We have got it out of the rock and roll garage here at the Fortress of Rock, heading into the rock and roll time stream. But first, got to take care of a little bit of business, and then we will give you birthdays, anniversaries of classic moments in rock history, album releases, all that good stuff. But first up, they let me down this week, my sources, because obviously there wasn't a lot, as Doc Brown pointed out, of news in the first segment. We do have a decent chunk of interesting stuff here in I Want to Go Back, so I guess I will still thank all of my main sources for stories and ideas. UltimateClassicRock.com, ThisDayInMusic.com, and the Van Halen Newsdesk.com. Then, of course, you have found us somewhere. Thank you for that. But you have options, you have choices. Wouldn't it be great to have more options and more choices, especially with a certain election coming up in less than a month? Wouldn't it be great to be able to choose between more than option A and option B and that? But with us, you do have options and choices. You can find the Fortress of Rock every Friday night. And you can find all of our back episodes on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, Audible, and recently added Good Pods. Don't forget to check out the Facebook page and all the fun stuff we do each and every weekend with the Facebook page. Of course, tonight, as every new episode of the Fortress of Rock drops, we also post the Weekend Rock Project. And I just mentioned politics. I am loath to discuss politics because whatever you want to think, whoever you want to vote for, that's up to you. Never let anybody tell you how to vote, how to think, how to feel. Don't let anybody bully you one way or the other. It's your choice, it's your vote. You do what you want. But how can you not be cynical? How can you not feel like the media lies to you, politicians lie to you, celebrities lie to you? So your Weekend Rock Project this week wants songs that either have truth or lies. The words. So we want true, truth, lies, lying, anything, any permutation, any different form of those words, or anything close. Truth and lies. We want your greatest rock songs. Throw them out there on the Facebook page. Post them. Because the Fortress of Rock will never lie to you. We will only give you the truth. But if you got a good song with lie in it, go for it. And then Sunday, of course, is New Music Sunday, where we will post a new music video. Probably something we have alluded to or discussed here on the current episode. Not sure yet what we're going to do this coming Sunday, but at halftime of one of the football games this Sunday, because I'm an NFL fanatic, that's usually when I will post a video from YouTube, either fully produced, a lyric video, a visualizer, whatever, just so you can listen to a brand new song, enjoy it, share it with your friends, because we have got to keep new music alive. We've got to listen to new music, listen to new bands, listen to the older bands as they put out new stuff, encourage them to put out new music. All right, so let's do birthdays first here in I Want to Go Back. Born on this day, October the 11th, 1962, Scott Johnson. Very interesting birthday here. Let me explain. He played guitar, and he still plays guitar for the Gin Blossoms. band that I like very, very much. But what I didn't realize, and I always tell you guys this is why, always keep your brain active, always do research, try to learn new things, even if it's about music. I'm not learning quantum physics here, but even when I learn something new about music, I get very excited. I did not realize that Scott Johnson, guitarist for Gin Blossoms, was also the guitarist on the first two albums from a band I'm going to see in a few weeks live in concert. Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers. He was on their first two studio albums before he left to rejoin the Gin Blossoms because they had been on a break. They had broken up. Scott Johnson jumped in at the beginning with Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers, and then he decided to retain his loyalty to the Gin Blossoms, go back to them, and he's been with them ever since. So very cool birthday for me personally. Born on this day in 1962, Scott Johnson, guitarist for Gin Blossoms, and for a brief period of time, Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers. Born on this day, October the 11th, 1950, Andrew Woolfolk, saxophone player for Earth, Wind, and Fire. Born on this day, October the 11th, 1946, Gary Malaber. He was the drummer through the heyday, let's say, of the Steve Miller Band, Book of Dreams, that mid-70s era. I believe he jumped in after the Joker. But their peak studio success. Steve Miller Band drummer Gary Malaber, born on this day in 1946. And then, of course, closing out birthdays with the biggest one of all, October the 11th, 1946. I cannot believe he's this old. I can't. I cannot believe it. Daryl Hall. Yes, of Hall & Oates. Born on this day in 1946. He's pushing 80? Really? Wow. I mean, this time passes, but that just freaks me out a little bit to think Daryl Hall is that old. 78 years old. If my math is correct. Yikes. Now, interestingly, I'm going to do a little bit of a tangent here. There were rumors at one point that Daryl Hall was being considered by one Edward Van Halen to be lead singer for Van Halen. Of course, this was after David Lee Roth had left the band to go out on his own. This week, give or take a day or two, features the birthdays of the two most significant lead singers, official lead singers of Van Halen. Sorry, Gary Cherone, I love you. You know I love you. Yesterday, October the 10th, was the birthday of Diamond Dave, David Lee Roth. And then this coming Sunday, October the 13th, the Red Rocker, Sammy Hagar. Of course, he's starting his birthday celebration. The man celebrates his birthday for, what, a month every year? Good for him. Good for Sammy. Because I just mentioned how blows my mind how old Daryl Hall is. I know Sammy's right up there with him. And Sammy Hagar, just seeing him in concert a few months ago, the energy, I don't know where he has found the fountain of youth, but God bless him. I kind of want him to let me in on the secret because he looks like he is going to live to 100 with the energy and how good he looks for his age. But very special week here on the Fortress of Rock as we break the rules as we always do for Van Halen. So both David Lee Roth yesterday, October the 10th, and coming up this Sunday, October the 13th, Sammy Hagar, happy birthday to the, again, two most notable lead singers in the history of the mighty Van Halen. Again, once again, apologies to the great Gary Cherone. All right, let's move on to anniversaries for October the 11th. Now, I will warn you, you guys are going to sit there for the most part and wonder, what is he talking about? This is not rock and roll. What is he doing? With really one notable exception, my anniversaries this week are going to be a little bit cuckoo crazy all over the map. But bear with me, I will explain most of them. First up, and we talked about this last year on the Fortress of Rock, it's getting to the point now where it gets a little odd, a little weird, where we report on somebody passing away and then a year later I bring them up in I Want to Go Back. They started off in News of the World, and now a year later they show up in I Want to Go Back. In this particular instance, for October the 11th, 2023, one of the Isley brothers, Rudolph Isley, passed away. Now, of course, I've mentioned to you how I loved my 70s, early 80s R&B, so anytime anybody involved in that music scene passes away or there's a significant milestone, we will always mention it. Now, here's the one. Here's the one where you guys are going to cringe, but please, please, please let me explain. Because it's got more to do with the charts, the Billboard charts, the record that was set, more so than the performer, the artist I'm going to mention. On this day, October the 11th, 2009, the number one album in the United States was Barbara Streisand's Love Is the Answer. Now I can hear you all going, groaning and go, what are you doing to us, Maestro? Here's why I'm bringing this up in I Want to Go Back. Barbara Streisand, with the number one album in 2009, made her the first artist ever to have a number one album in the U.S. in 5 different decades. Blows my mind. The Beatles didn't do it. Nobody that I can tell, and I tried to dig up anybody else, believe me, I tried to find somebody who would unseat Babs, but I could not. So from what I can tell, Barbara Streisand is the only artist ever to have a U.S. number one album in 5 different decades. That is impressive, kids. Now, we talked about the recording of this song a couple months ago. But on this day, October the 11th, 1997, is when Elton John's Candle in the Wind 97 version was number one on the U.S. singles charts. Of course, went on to be the biggest, if not the biggest, one of the biggest songs ever. And when we referenced it recently, it was, of course, because he played it, he performed it at Princess Diana's funeral. On this day, October the 11th, 1991, Apple Computers reached a settlement with Apple Corporation, of course, that being the Beatles record label and their entire business entity. And of course, it was over name and logo rights. Now, this was back again in 1991. Keep that in mind when I tell you that it looks like the financial number that was settled on, Apple Computers paid Apple Corporation $29 million. Doesn't seem like all that much nowadays, does it? But you think about, in 1991, did Apple Computers really have that much of a foothold? It was more about, what is this company going to become? Let's just take what capital we've got now, settle this with the Beatles. We don't want to change our corporate image, our logo. We're starting some, and of course now, Apple Computers makes what, 29 million in globally in a minute every day? That's just a guess, but it just seems like 29 million is a drop in the bucket. But again, this was 1991. Apple Computers was not all that well established yet. Now here's the one big rock and roll for sure anniversary. October the 11th, 1990. Dave Grohl played his first gig ever with Nirvana in Olympia, Washington. And then finally, in anniversaries, October the 11th, 1986, you know I have a fondness for early Janet Jackson. Great song, When I Think of You, was the #1 single in the U.S. on this day in 1986. So there you go, kids. There is I Want to Go Back. Your birthdays, your anniversaries, your classic moments in rock history. Doc Brown seems a little relieved in that I think he's saying that was acceptable. That was good enough. Took a lot of the pressure off the fact that early on in the show we didn't have a lot. Plus the kids, I'm trying to tell them, you guys being the kids need a week where we don't go an hour and 35, an hour and 40 minutes. They could use a little bit of a break. Weather's starting to turn. Fall is coming, which means winter is coming, so that's in the back of all of our minds. Just everybody chill out. The Fortress of Rock is here to get you through the weekend, but we're not going to overdo it this weekend. So now we move on to, of course, segment 4. Wrap it up, our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. This is where we say, hey, we talked about the present in segment 1 and segment 2, the present day situation of rock and roll. We just got done in segment 3 looking at the past. Now we look to the future. So next week, episode 166, as I threw you my curveball today and screwed things up, which I will do once in a while. Episode 166, next Friday, October the 18th, we will review The Offspring, the brand new album from The Offspring, Supercharged. I know you're already going, where are the Smashing Pumpkins? You promised us the Smashing Pumpkins. I'll get to it in a minute. In 2 weeks, a band we just mentioned a few minutes ago, when we get back into concert reviews. Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers live in Kalamazoo, Michigan at Bell's Eccentric Cafe. That will be your featured review, episode 167, on October the 25th. Be seeing them, of course, the previous Sunday, October the 20th. Then 3 weeks. Brand new album, brand new solo album from Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains, I Want Blood. Episode 168 on November the 1st. We'll have that for you. Then back into live music again in 4 weeks. One of the final shows ever for REO Speedwagon, as they're calling it quits, on January the 1st, 2025. In terms of live performances, REO Speedwagon with Loverboy. Yes, another Loverboy show. That will be featured episode 169 on November the 8th, 2024. Smashing Pumpkins. Okay, I'm not trying to be mean to Smashing Pumpkins. As I mentioned early on in this episode, I have listened to Agori Mori Me. I'm working on giving it a full review, but it's just different. A performer like Myles Kennedy, a band coming up next week like The Offspring, where I have their entire catalog, and I'm an ardent fan, and I've listened to them for decades. Of course, Myles Kennedy, decades including Alter Bridge. Yes, I've listened to the Smashing Pumpkins for decades as well, but I've never been enamored with them. I've kind of jumped in and out on their catalog. I don't have all their albums. I kind of drifted away from them for a time. Recently came back. As you guys know, we reviewed it. We saw them live last year. Phenomenal live show, but their triple CD collection, Autumn, was underwhelming, so I'm trying to be a little bit more careful. I want to give them a fair review for their new album, Agori Mori Me. Now, it's coming out in a physical edition on November the 22nd. It's obviously been out digitally for a while. You can listen to it on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to your free music. I'm trying to figure out, do I want to wait and review it right around the time the CD comes out, which maybe makes more sense in some kind of way. So I will get to it, I promise you. I've already invested time in it, so that means that I will definitely review it at some point in time. But now I think I'm pushing it back to mid to late November. But I will get to Smashing Pumpkins, Agori Mori Me, at some point before the end of November. Now, in terms of new songs, a recurring theme. I went on my little rant earlier about U2 and talked about Tom Petty and then talked about Van Halen in terms of old archival songs. Material that we've never heard before that the fans want to hear. Well, guess what? We've got another example of a band that's trying. Even though they are not together anymore, they have a lot of infighting and they just can't get together. You got different factions in the band fighting amongst each other. One of the original band members has passed away quite a while ago, so it's getting very difficult, very hard to see Rat ever getting back together again. It seems especially Stephen Pearcy, Bobby Blotzer, just can't seem to come to an agreement about bringing the rest of the band together without, of course, Robin Crosby, who passed away. But we're getting a reissued, remastered version of Out of the Cellar. And there is a bonus track, a never-before-released bonus track on this remastered reissue of Out of the Cellar. Now, it's going to sound like something, when I tell you the title, you're going to go, I know that. You do and you don't. The song I am discussing, which we will review in the next few weeks here on the Fortress of Rock, is Reach for the Sky. The reason why, as a Rat fan, if you're a Rat fan, like I am, you're thinking that sounds really familiar, because of course they had an album called Reach for the Sky, but there was never a song on Reach for the Sky called Reach for the Sky. They had recorded a song with that title during the sessions for Out of the Cellar. And it is now out, and you guys can listen to it, again, wherever you listen to your music, Spotify, iTunes, wherever. But we will review it for you in the next few weeks here on the Fortress of Rock. I've listened to it. Very, very, very good. And it just enhances my argument, backs up my argument again, as to why aren't more old school classic rock bands releasing the archival vault material. It is selfish, because your fans are going to die. You're going to die, and your fans are going to die before they get to hear it. How selfish is that? Alex Van Halen, Wolfgang Van Halen. A couple songs that we talked about last week that are on the agenda for next week. Motley Crue, the third song from their EP, ridiculously, stupidly overpriced EP, the CD version of the EP. 3 songs they want on Amazon. They want $11 for 3 songs. We have heard Dogs of War. We have heard Fight for Your Right. And now, the title track, canceled from this ridiculously overpriced EP. We'll have that for you next week on the Fortress of Rock, as well as the second release from the upcoming Tears for Fears live album, which features 4 new songs. Of course, we've already discussed The Girl That I Call Home, the second of the new songs to be released, Astronaut. We'll have that for you next week on the Fortress of Rock. Songs for a Nervous Planet, I believe is the name of the live collection from Tears for Fears. Now, because, as I just mentioned a few minutes ago, I gave you the rundown for the next month or so in terms of what we're going to have on each episode here on the Fortress of Rock. Jerry Cantrell, we're 3 weeks out on reviewing that album. Now, technically, it's going to come out, I believe, here within the next week or so, but because of the Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers concert, have to bump that back a week. So technically the third single from I Want Blood, Jerry Cantrell's upcoming solo album, is out now. So I might try to slip that in next week. So we've already had Vilified, which was unbelievable. Great, great song. The first single off of I Want Blood. Then we had Afterglow, which I wasn't a big fan of. And now, right before the release of the album, the title track, I Want Blood, is out now. So get out there, listen to it, kids. I will do my best to give you, if I don't review it next week, let's put it this way. If I don't review it next week, I'm just going to wait for the full album review. Okay? There you go. And finally, our tribute to the Billboard charts. Of course, in I Want to Go Back, we talked a lot about the charts we do every week. including, yes, talking about Barbara Streisand and Janet Jackson and Elton John. Really not artists we normally talk about here on the Fortress of Rock, but you guys know how special the Billboard charts are to me. Casey Kasem and America's Top 40, listening to that on the radio here locally every Sunday morning. Back in the 70s and the 80s, when it mattered, when the charts actually were somewhat representative of what people were listening to. So that's why now, here in 2024, we started our own Fortress of Rock charts. So each and every week at the end of every podcast episode, I will tell you what my top album is and what my top 2 songs are. Yes, I cheat with the songs. I should just pick one, but I usually pick 2. And this week is no exception. Now, you would think, let's start off with the number 1 album of the week here on the Fortress of Rock. You would think, because I sat here for most of the day today, as I puttered around and paid bills and did stuff that normal human beings do, I listened to Myles Kennedy's brand new album, The Art of Letting Go, probably 5 or 6 times. You would think, wow, that's got to be the number 1 album. No, it is not. One day does not maketh an album number 1. By a slim, narrow margin, because of the other 6 days in the week. For the second week in a row, Soul Asylum will hold on to the number 1 slot on the album charts here on the Fortress of Rock with Slowly But Surely. A little bit of an upset. Now, I did not think it would be an upset. But with the way things transpired today, maybe now it looks like a little bit of a dark horse pick, but Slowly But Surely by Soul Asylum will retain the number 1 slot on our album charts for at least one more week. Dare I say, Myles Kennedy probably going to be number 1 next week. Our top songs. You can pretty much tell my unbridled enthusiasm for Picture of You, X plus W from U2, and the How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb sessions. That is one of our top songs, along with, it's got to be something off of Myles Kennedy's new album, right? No! Again! No. Not yet. If You Want It Back, one of the standout tracks off of, yes, Slowly But Surely from Soul Asylum, will share the honors as top song of the week here on the Fortress of Rock. So, to recap, number 1 album, Slowly But Surely by Soul Asylum, and our top songs of the week here on the Fortress of Rock charts, Picture of You, X plus W by U2, and Soul Asylum's If You Want It Back. A little bit of a surprise there, huh? Wasn't, given what we were talking about earlier, you weren't quite expecting that, were you? But that's going to do it for the Fortress of Rock. For once, I promised and I delivered when it comes to a little bit of a shorter episode. I did my best to flesh it out as much as I could to give you something substantial, but there just was nothing this week in terms of rock and roll news to really report. But otherwise, a pretty solid episode nonetheless. So you know what that means. Next week, we're probably going to get 35-40 minutes worth of discussion topics when it comes to rock and roll news. That's the way it usually goes. But it's all good. Doesn't matter. We'll balance it out. We'll figure it out each and every week here on the Fortress of Rock. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You are who you are. Hope you have a great weekend. Love the ones you're with. Have fun. Be safe. Listen to some great music. Watch some football. Watch a movie, a scary movie. It's October. Lots of great scary movies out there to watch here for the next few weeks leading up to Halloween. Have fun. Again, take care of yourself, your family, your friends. And we'll talk again about the music that we all love in 7 days. Until then, peace out.